Well, isn't it about time I covered a good WWF game on here for a change? I think the last WWF game on here that I actually enjoyed playing again was the first SmackDown on the PlayStation 1, which was a good few years ago now. Since then I decided to go way back to the beginning, covering WWF games on various systems from NES and Amiga all the way up to the Game Boy Advance, which is when you last would have got your wrestling fix on this channel. Fair enough to say there was a few bumpy roads on the way with some of the worst games I've ever played, but thankfully now we are completely up to date in my timeline for how I wanted this series to go. With all that being said, it's about time I took a look at this gem. So here it is, WWF Wrestlemania 2000 for the Nintendo 64. I hope you enjoy. WWF in the late 90s into the early 2000s was amazing. I mean, we really did get treated to some class TV back then. Not only was the wrestling we'd see on TV quality and highly entertaining, but also the things that would help us get our fix when nothing was on. You have to give it to their marketing team, they had people like me hooked. If it wasn't live on TV, I'd be collecting the cards, stickers for the books, playing with the figures in my own Fig Federation, backdropping my brother from my mother's bed onto the floor. I was just obsessed. They always had something wrestling related you could do when it wasn't on TV, and this includes gaming also. If you have been following me on this journey, you may already know that my first proper experience with a WWF game was the first SmackDown on PlayStation 1, which was released in March of 2000. WrestleMania 2000 came out just before it, releasing in October of 1999, so I completely missed it. By this time I was all about the PlayStation. I thought up to that point I'd had my fun with Nintendo 64 with the likes of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart, GoldenEye, etc. Plus, what kid is going to turn down the new shiny console over the old one? Come to think of it, I couldn't even remember seeing an advert for this until I'd done my research and, oh yeah, I remember. The one with The Rock being annoyed about how much his in-game counterpart was very much like him in real life, and also that he was going to...
The Rock is going to take that little green bag, all those little video games, and stick them straight up your candy ass.
Great stuff. But I must have got that advert confused with the SmackDown game that would be coming out a few months later, because up to this point in my life as a kid, WWF Wrestlemania 2000 for the Nintendo 64 just didn't exist. I was teased with it though as a kid, while searching wrestling related content online back in the day, and this is a great time for me to bring this up. Did anyone else ever see the photo of WrestleMania 2000, but on a PS1 box as if to say it was already out, or at least on its way? Well, I did, and I have never seen it since. Naturally, I had my mum searching all shops in town for it. I even remember asking a guy behind the counter of a shop and him telling me that it didn't exist, but I was 100% sure it did. I'd obviously been had, and I found myself on an early forum where some Nintendo 64 fan must have been laughing at the PS1 players because what they had with SmackDown was nothing compared to WrestleMania 2000 for the Nintendo 64. A few years would pass until I would finally get my hands on it, but not in the form of a PlayStation 1 disc, but of course a Nintendo 64 cartridge. This was back in the day when you could pick up what would be known as now as retro games for next to nothing. I'm positive it was like £1 or something, but £1 well spent all things considered. I remember taking it home, dusting off the old Nintendo 64, putting the cartridge in, and thinking it absolutely sucked. Now please hear me out. I'm only ever going to be as honest as I can be on here, and timing is key to this story. I was balls deep with SmackDown Here Comes the Pain at this point, invested in the newer guys coming up through the ranks like Brock Lesnar, John Cena. Previous guys I love like Stone Cold and The Rock would be seen less and less on TV, while the guys I grew up with were reinventing their characters like The Undertaker becoming Big Evil and Kane unmasking, and I was enjoying the new current era at the time, which is now known as the Ruthless Aggression era. However, it wasn't all doom and gloom, and you'll probably be happy to hear that my opinions since then have changed about this game. I want to go through the things I did enjoy about this from the perspective of my young mind at the time, and then speak of what I didn't like, but now do. The character selection is off the scale in this. There is a whopping 50 wrestlers to choose from at the start of the game. More can be unlocked, but I'll cover that in a bit. With the game being released during the height of the Attitude Era, they have packed the game out with everyone from around late 98 into 1999. Of course you have all the big players from the time, with the likes of The Rock, Stone Cold, Undertaker, Triple H, Kane, etc., but they have done a good job to include a lot of the mid-carder guys and lower from the time. A few deep cuts would be included with the likes of Midian, the Blue Meanie, Meat, and even the likes of Chaz, who was previously known as Mosh and was a member of the Headbangers along with Thrasher, who is also included but looks a bit out of place with Mosh not being included. All the big tag teams are also included with the likes of Farouk and Bradshaw of the Acolytes, the New Age Outlaws, the Hardy Boys, some forgettable tag teams too like Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor, who are representing their look as the tag team duo of Too Much here, which was just before they would reach much greater success as the tag team of Too Cool. Along with tag teams, we have all stables from this time period, all members of DX, Ministry of Darkness, the Job Squad. Along with having a packed out roster of guys, it also includes some divas with the likes of Chyna, Deborah, Jacqueline, Terry Runnels, Torrie and Ivory. It really is a packed out roster and represents this time frame perfectly. Also, while on the character's selection screen, if you press C left on the controller, it will allow you to choose from 4 different attires for each wrestler. So if you preferred Kane's inverted attire, go for it. You think X-Pac looked cooler with the jersey on? It's here. Having alternative attire for each wrestler is a fantastic addition, but I do feel they took liberties. Because as it may make sense for a lot of these guys to have different attire to choose from, I can't ever remember either Farouk or Bradshaw rocking these purple ties. Please let me know if I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, then that's a quality inclusion. Also, while on the selection screen, whatever wrestler you are hovering over will do a signature pose or taunt of theirs, which I found pretty cool. You can also spin each wrestler around and zoom in and out so you can see their whole attire or read certain logos on the back of them if they have a shirt on. A few notable wrestlers who were active during the game's development were unfortunately cut from the game. These included Owen Hart, Nicole Bass, Tiger Ali Singh, Gilbert, Goldust, Sable and Ryan Shamrock. All we needed was Ryan Shamrock to complete the stable of Pretty Mean Sisters. Damn! If for some reason this roster isn't good or big enough for you, then there is a great Create a Wrestler section for you to get stuck into. You can make something completely original or even make a guy from that period you wish had been in the game but wasn't. Even though for the most part they covered everyone, I did enjoy finding a Create a Wrestler list online to make Kurt Angle, who would have just missed the cutoff point for this game. It's pretty in depth for its time and definitely beats other WWF games before and after this in the Create a Wrestler department. Not only can you choose what a wrestler looks like visually, but you can also give him a proper moveset too. I like that you can preview an animation of what moves actually look like if you weren't familiar of them by name. It goes deeper than this, but to be honest I was never really a fan of Create a Wrestler in the earlier games because for the most part they always got the roster right, but I can imagine if this is your thing you could get lost in it for hours. The best use I always got out of these features is the ability to preview a song. When I used to play with the figures I'd always have certain games on standby so I could play their theme while they made their way down to the ring. I know, sad right? But I loved it at the time. You can also edit existing wrestlers in the game too, change their attires, theme music, entrance videos, who they partner with and who they're feuding with, but be warned, whatever you alter can change certain things in the game like the game's intro. For example, if you decided you wanted Stone Cold to sport a pink and white version of Kane's attire, this will now show in the game's intro. Don't worry, you can easily restore everything back to the default settings. Just a friendly heads up before you turn your game into a complete mess though. Before the action begins, we must talk about the game's entrances, and they are brilliant. Each wrestler comes to the ring with their own unique theme song and video. This is to a very high level which we had never seen in a WWF game up to this point. The best we'd had up to now is WWF Attitude, which had released a few months prior to WrestleMania 2000, and that was pretty bad. The wrestlers moved so stiff and looked absolutely soulless. This is like a breath of fresh air though. If you've seen a wrestler on TV come down to the ring with a prop, you're more than likely going to see it in this. You'll see Val Venus coming down with a towel wrapped round his waist, Godfather will come out with one of his hose, Stone Cold with his leather vest. I'm sure you get the point. On top of this, if your wrestler has a manager, they will also be accompanied down to the ring with them. You'll see Jeff Jarrett accompanied by Deborah, draws with Prince Albert. It's just a great added touch to replicate the real life thing we'd seen on TV at the time. Tag team entrances are here also, but some you may have to tinker with in the edit settings to get them to come out with each other. I wanted to have a match involving Billy Gunn and Road Dogg, but when it came to the entrances, Billy Gunn came out by himself, then Road Dogg. I was like, nah, I need the real thing. So I went to edit Billy Gunn's entrance theme to be the Road Dogg's theme, loaded the match up, and boom, they came out together as the New Age Outlaws. It doesn't take long to do, so it's not a big deal, but it's nice that you have the option to do this. By far though, the greatest entrance in this has to be the Brood's. It's done perfectly for the time, with the Brood rising up from the stage surrounded by fire, and you'll also see Gangrel spit his blood into the crowd when they get down to the ring. There are title belts in this game, but for some reason you don't see the wrestlers wearing or bringing them down to the ring. You can however see them wear it in the character selection screen if you hover over them. I think it would have been cool to see them bringing them down to the ring also though. If I really had to nitpick though, I'd say the quality of the theme songs aren't that great, but really, what do you expect from a cartridge based Nintendo game back then? I think they gave the wrestlers with a more iconic theme and entrance a fuller version of their theme, but there are a lot of wrestlers' themes that just seem to loop, which really I don't have much of a problem with. They did do their best with what they had. Also goes for the entrance videos too, very pixelated, resembling more of a slideshow rather than full motion video, but yet again this is only due to the limitations in space on a cartridge. I've got to say they've done a much better job in this compared to the entrances we'd see in the first SmackDown game that came out on the PlayStation 1 a few months later, which I just think is insane. The stages and set designs look great also. There's a mix of stages here from both 1998 and 1999. These include the Royal Rumble, Raw, Sunday Night Heat, King of the Ring, Survivor Series, SummerSlam and WrestleMania. Great care and attention to detail can be seen with these stage designs and mimic the real life stages we seen at these pay-per-views back then, like the gates that would open on the set of SummerSlam 1998. Even though the game is called WrestleMania 2000, we wouldn't see the set for the real WrestleMania 2000 pay-per-view for obvious reasons, but they went with the WrestleMania 1999 set with a 2000 logo behind it. I know I said this when I reviewed WrestleMania 2000 for the Game Boy Color, but I find it cool how the theme with this game's cover obviously looks like the real life's WrestleMania 2000 theme. Just goes to show you how far in advance they must think of these things. All stages appear to be fully 3D up close, but when it transitions to the wrestler at the bottom of the ramp, the stages appear to be flat resolution pictures of the stage, and I still think it looks great. All in, the entrances are fantastic in this. Can't fault them at all. Now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this game, and that is the gameplay. This is where when I first played this back when I was younger, it completely lost me. I feel so stupid saying this now, but I initially thought the gameplay was terrible. I was so used to the simplicity of the SmackDown games at the time that these controls went completely over my head. I thought they were crap and not enjoyable at all, along with being incredibly outdated. And believe it or not, it sat gathering dust while I continued to be balls deep with Here Comes the Pain. However, my love affair with Here Comes the Pain would come to an end, and I thought I'd give it a second chance. And I don't know what happened this time round, but my whole opinion of this game changed. Hindsight is such a wonderful thing, isn't it? I was sitting playing Here Comes the Pain and thought that had a lot more to offer in gameplay over WrestleMania 2000. How naive was I? I must address the elephant in the room when it comes to this game, and that is the now legendary Aki game engine. You see, for the majority of the Monday Night Wars, WCW wasn't just beating WWF in the TV ratings, it was destroying them in the merchandise department too, especially in the gaming industry. As much as I preferred WWF, I can't help but think we got completely shafted with the games that came out around that time. We had Warzone, they had WCW versus NWO World Tour, we would get Attitude, they would get WCW NWO Revenge, which is highly regarded as the greatest wrestling game of all time, and it really came down to one thing: game developers. See, up to this point, WWF had a long relationship with Acclaim, who is probably to blame for the poor quality of games we got. But thankfully, that would all change. Not only would WWF begin to destroy WCW in the ratings and slowly begin to steal their talent, but they'd also secure a deal with Aki Corporation to start developing their Nintendo 64 titles, which made them cut ties with WCW, which was massive at the time. WCW would strike a deal with EA and, well, the less said about that the better. We were finally getting a WWF game that would be on par with WCW NWO Revenge. So how did the engine that was so popular with WCW games translate over to WWF games? Well, like a bloody dream. You control movement of your wrestler with the D-pad. Tapping B will deliver strikes to your opponent, while pressing A will initiate a tie-up to pull off a grappling move. Simple enough, but it goes much further than this. By holding in either A or B, it will deliver either a stronger striking attack or a stronger grappling move. It is advised to weaken an opponent first before starting to pull off stronger grappling or striking moves, because your opponent is more than likely going to reverse your attack. Speaking of reversals, you can do this by timing your button press on either R or L buttons to reverse a strike or grapple move. You can also change your position when in a tie-up by pressing L to either go behind an opponent or face them, depending on what kind of move you're looking to pull off. Moves off the turnbuckle are included also. Your opponent can be standing or down, and if they don't reverse, you can deliver an aerial attack. At first I really enjoyed this style of gameplay, but the more I played it, the more I ended up discovering, which ended up blowing my mind, like being able to do moves on an opponent standing on the apron, or flying from the ring onto an opponent standing at ringside. Literally almost everything you can think of you can do in real life is present in this game. You may have noticed the meters at the bottom of the screen. These are called the attitude meters. The more you pull off moves and momentum shifts in your favour, the bar will continue to fill. Once it starts blinking, taunt your opponent by flicking the analog stick in any directions, and you'll have a limited time to pull off your finishing move. Do a strong grapple by holding A. Once tied up, flick the analog stick again and you'll pull off a finisher. It's absolutely brilliant. You'll see a replay of the finisher in different angles, mimicking what we would have seen on TV at the time. You can also add serious insult to injury on your opponent by stealing their very own finisher. To do this, instead of flicking the analog stick, press A and B together and wham, you've stolen your opponent's finisher. You can also steal your opponent's taunts in this too, which can make a two-player match in this pretty intense if you're just taking the mickey out of whoever you're playing with. Weapons are included also, but you don't pick them up from under the ring. Instead, you go over to the crowd and by pressing up on the C controls, you'll be handed a weapon to punish your opponent with. Just make sure not to lose it while in the ring though, because, yeah, this happens. Regardless though, it's still a nice touch to have weapons included. There are run-ins too. If you have an ally or a feud with someone, you'll either have someone come out and help you or someone will come out and beat you up. I do find it funny when this happens though, because you'll hear someone's music hit, then the camera will zoom in on them as they run down to the ring. It's a nice touch, but if you begin to find it annoying, it can be easily turned off in the options menu. All in, the madness that you would have seen on the TV at the time is replicated brilliantly in this. There are a handful of match types to choose from here. Single matches, freeway matches, tag matches, and steel cage. But inside of this you can edit the stipulations for each match. You could turn off no DQ to make it a hardcore match, choose to make it a lumberjack match. The Royal Rumble is a playable mode in this too, but I'm not sure if the developers are aware of how the real Royal Rumble actually works. For some reason you can eliminate opponents with a pinfall, submission moves, and also by going through the middle and top rope instead of actual Royal Rumble rules, with elimination only occurring when an opponent is thrown over the top rope with both feet touching the floor. As great as the game is, it's within the Royal Rumble where you'll find its flaws. There can only be a maximum of 4 players in the ring at one time, and even with just the 4, you will encounter some slowdown unfortunately. Also, to keep the gameplay even slower during this match type, when a new opponent enters the ring it zooms in on them at the stage as they make their way down to the ring. My favourite match type that I did enjoy with this game though the most had to be the steel cage match. They managed to pull this off perfectly in this, apart from of course its massive size and height. That's just ridiculous, but the gameplay within this match is fantastic. You can fire your opponent into the cage. Attempting to escape was also enjoyable, having to mash the button as you get closer to the top before finally escaping. Of course you can shake the cage to stop your opponent, or you can head up also trying to catch up to them. You can be in defense by landing kicks as they make their way up, or if you reach them, punch them so they will end up falling down. I honestly had a blast playing this match. Along with the different match types on offer, there are a few game modes to choose from also. King of the Ring is here and it's exactly like the real thing. You can go through this as a single or tag team style tournament. Not really something I got into, as I'd prefer to just choose who I'm facing in exhibition mode, but it's here if it's your type of thing. You can also set up your very own pay-per-view in this, select a name for your event, date and arena. You can have up to 15 matches on the one card packed with the different match types I have mentioned already, and decide if belts are on the line or not. Much like King of the Ring, it's not really my thing, but it's a nice inclusion for someone who could potentially get lost in it. However, the biggest mode to choose from in this is more than likely the Road to WrestleMania. This is the game's career mode. As much as this game has great gameplay, they kind of dropped the ball with its career mode. It's more or less the exact same as Attitude's career mode, where you pick a wrestler to go through and just get put in random matches over the course of a year's schedule. Not really much to do, as you may already know I prefer my career modes to be pretty in depth. You do get the odd cutscene sort of like the first SmackDown game, but not as frequent. I do like when you start a show though, it has the pyro and all that for it with the music on top. I thought that was pretty cool. It's a bore to go through though, but if you want to unlock the game's hidden superstars, this is how you'll have to do it. Each of the 7 wrestlers you can unlock has a requirement for you to fulfill before unlocking. For example, if you want to unlock Shawn Michaels, you must win the WWF title. If you want to unlock Paul Bearer, you must play a few matches as The Undertaker, then Paul Bearer will eventually start coming to the ring with you. The graphics are another part about this game I really like. Yeah, I'm sure to some it looks a bit ropey, but I still feel they hold up pretty well, and unlike Attitude where I suppose the graphics looked alright, at least with WrestleMania 2000 they had the gameplay to back it up. All the wrestlers look the part, and it's easy to tell who's who. The crowd looked great also, really lively with their signs held up and really just gives me that Attitude Era vibe. The game was met with good reviews, really just comparing it to WCW NWO Revenge. It did seem to get slated in the audio department, but like I said, what do you expect from a game on a cartridge? The theme music may be a bit terrible to some, but the actual in-game music you hear while navigating menus and wrestling is on point. Heavy guitar riffs that seem to stay with the WWF games going forward at this point. Anybody ever noticed how the main menu music sounds like Pantera's tune Psycho Holiday? All in, personally, WrestleMania 2000 is an absolute masterpiece. And although I didn't enjoy it the first time round as a kid, which looking back now all I can think is, was I that daft? I can now truly appreciate it for how great it is. The character selection is on point, the graphics still hold up to this day, and the gameplay is still very enjoyable. I think if I wasn't balls deep in SmackDown Here Comes the Pain when I first played this, I would have enjoyed it. And I know for a fact if I had both the first SmackDown on PlayStation 1 and this WrestleMania 2000 in front of me as a kid when they both come out, I would have definitely have chosen WrestleMania 2000. Yeah, it may not have full motion videos and CD quality like music, but at the end of the day it'll always come down to gameplay for me. Up to this point in this series, WrestleMania 2000 is 100% my favourite game so far, although that may change when I do my next wrestling video game review, No Mercy, which I'm going to need some time for, so expect a few filler videos to come out before this please, as I want to do it justice. Now that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed, please consider giving the video a like along with subscribing, or dislike if you didn't. Either way it helps me know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. Also, if you've played this game yourself, leave a comment with your opinions or experience with this game. Thanks for watching and I'll hopefully catch you in the next one. See ya!